I'm Dwayne Brown. Tonight on KPBS Evening Edition, rain arrives at last in San Diego. What forecasters are watching for as the storm rolls through. Students walk out of classes at San Diego City College trying to bring people together after violent protests in Ferguson, Missouri.
I'm Peggy Pico. Also ahead, how will President Obama's plan to improve community policing impact the San Diego Police Department and local communities? Plus, December Nights at Balboa Park begins this Friday, and it's the official kickoff to the 2015 centennial celebration. Renowned California historian Kevin Starr shows us how the park really got its start.
How do you get healthy students interested in signing up for health care? We'll have a look at the strategy in play at San Diego State. KPBS Evening Edition starts right now. San Diego's been waiting a long time for this. The rain is here, and there's a flash flood watch in effect through most of the county. Now, we haven't had a lot of rain so far, but more is expected through the night. Hi, good evening. Thanks for joining us. Folks have been getting ready for the rain in flood-prone areas like Mission Beach. The Weather Service is predicting close to 2 inches of rain there. The manager of the Mission Beach Coffee Break told us they've been caught off guard before.
Sometimes it gets really bad. One time we were unprepared and water ended up inside the store quite a bit.
So what are you guys doing to prepare yourselves today?
Right now we're just cleaning up inside, getting everything organized, and basically just stack sandbags and hope for the best. Hopefully the water doesn't come up too much.
Weather Service says we could see some street flooding and flash floods along the coast and inland valleys, but the greatest chance of flooding most likely in the mountain areas. Sandbags are being handed out at fire and lifeguard stations around the county. San Diego is looking for a permanent building to house up to 350 homeless people so it can do away with those temporary facilities in Barrio Logan and the Midway District. Mayor Kevin Faulkner says boosting shelter quality fits well with the city's greater focus to get people off the streets for good.
The City of San Diego and the San Diego Housing Commission are asking homeless service providers to submit proposals for a permanent, year-round housing facility for homeless adults.
The city doesn't plan to provide a building for the new shelter, but will ask a nonprofit service agency to provide space and run it. The city has roughly $1.5 million to contribute to the permanent facility, which it hopes to open by July 1st next year. About 200 City College students walked out of classes today to honor Michael Brown, a Missouri teenager shot and killed by a police officer back in August. San Diego students joined a chorus of protests across the nation today, stemming from a grand jury decision not to indict that officer. Today's demonstrators said they wanted to bring groups together, even law enforcement.
Even the cops, we love you guys too, but you guys need to know, let your friends know, let the other police know, hey, stop the violence, help us, protect us.
If you see a black man die and a white man die and they're next to each other, wouldn't you care about them? One's not more important than the other. And that's what people need to understand. Nobody's better than anybody. We're all human.
City College faculty also joined the peaceful demonstration. Now, as reaction to the shooting in Ferguson ripples across the country, Peggy Pico takes a look at community policing in San Diego and how it's changing.
Yesterday, President Obama proposed a $263 million investment package to increase use of body-worn cameras, expand training for law enforcement agencies, and add resources for police department reform. Joining me to talk about community-oriented policing in San Diego is my guest, Detective Sergeant Ben Kelso, president of the San Diego Black Police Officers Association. And Ben, welcome back.
Thank you, Peggy.
Now, we keep hearing this community policing. What is community policing?
You know, in a generalized concept, community policing is nothing more than collaborative efforts between law enforcement and community stakeholders on defining what the objectives are for law enforcement and working together to try to solve those problems.
And specifically in certain neighborhoods, right? Diverse neighborhoods.
Correct.
I see. What's your overall take on relations between minority communities and the San Diego Police Department?
You know, depending on the national outlook, those relationships can be strained at times, and at other times they're better. Right now, based on the year-long efforts we've seen to try to improve the relationship, the police department has put out body-worn cameras and done some other things to try to improve, but it's still a work in progress.
Before we get to the cameras, how do you think federal oversight could assist with community policing, this federal oversight that the president's proposing? You know,
I believe it's got promise. It's got, especially given that there will be funding put to those programs to kind of help those things out. There was a time when San Diego was a national model of community-based policing, and I think budget cuts and other funding issues have hampered those efforts.
Well, I know the San Diego Police Department has plans to equip all its officers, I believe, with body cameras by the end of next year. What role do you think that will play in addressing the issues of trust between police and maybe these neighborhoods that it hasn't traditionally been so?
Well, I believe that the cameras will help in some ways, but then in other ways maybe not so much. It's still kind of up in the air on what the effect of it will be, because we don't know how people are going to interpret what they see on those videos.
So in interpretation, are there rules and policies in place already as far as for the San Diego Police Department on when these cameras, will they go on automatically, when they roll, things like that?
There are some intro procedures in place that the chief has addressed. It's still a study and a pilot program. The officers will still have to manually operate those cameras, and the details are being worked out on what happens when that doesn't take place.
What are the officers that you're speaking with, and what have they told you as far as, are they in favor of wearing body cameras?
Most officers that we're talking to are pleased with the cameras so far and like the efforts to use them.
You mentioned just a few minutes ago that San Diego used to be a model in terms of community-oriented policing, and that changed. What happened? You know,
I think budget cuts, the economic downturn nationwide affected how law enforcement agencies across the nation did their work, and in San Diego especially, because we had to figure out what were going to be our best efforts and what we had to apply them to, and that was answering radio calls.
So back in the day when it was the model, what was that like?
Well, that was some good times. We definitely built some strong relationships. San Diego was a winner of the Goldstein Award for community-based policing. There were teams out that were working with community leaders to solve projects. Operation Weed and Seed was one of them, and there were countless many others that worked really well. But when funding dried up for those things, we had to figure out what our basic function was, and that's responding to emergencies.
What do you think it'll take to bring that sort of model community policing back to San Diego?
Well, there are probably a lot of things. Funding would be one of them. I think definitely reaching out and doing better recruiting efforts to bring in more officers. We're losing officers at a high rate, and that affects how we enforce the laws and what types of things that we work on out there. If we can grow our department back, maybe we'll be able to do more to those efforts.
Do you think the San Diego will see any of the federal funding that the president has been talking about?
You know, I'm unaware of whether or not we will specifically see, so we'd certainly like to.
It might be hoping for it. What do you want to say to people as far as now what the community members can do to build up relationships and to work with the police, especially in this time following Ferguson where there's just protest and anxieties are very high?
I think if the community leaders, and some of them are coming forward and working together in coalition with the police department to try to solve some of these issues and open up lines of dialogue, things will get a lot better.
All right, Detective Sergeant Ben Kelso, thank you so much.
Thank you.
City of San Diego is ramping up efforts to close illegal medical marijuana facilities. The city attorney, Jan Goldsmith, highlighted the possible dangers of dispensaries that go unregulated. KPBS Metro reporter Taryn Minto joins us with the details. Taryn, what was the city attorney's announcement today?
Dwayne, Goldsmith announced felony weapons and drug charges against an unlicensed medical marijuana dispensary called Market Greens. After the unlicensed facility ignored a court order to shut down, police searched the premises and found handguns and cocaine. Goldsmith says this is the kind of illegal activity the city's new rules would prevent.
Our conditions require licensed security guards on the premises during all business hours, security cameras, and alarms, posting of the name and phone number of the operator and manager, background checks, and fingerprinting for all responsible persons involved in operating the dispensary, and preclusion of certain convicted criminals from participating.
Now, we know the council approved those new rules back in March. Do we know, Taryn, how many dispensaries are still operating without a permit?
An important thing to mention is this recent shutdown is notable because the guns were illegal. One of the handguns was stolen. Another was found in possession of a convicted felon. Other recently publicized shutdowns were because dispensaries violated zoning rules. Chief Shelley Zimmerman said there's still about 40 operating without a permit, so the department is upping its enforcement.
Given the danger illegal dispensaries pose to our neighborhoods and the numerous complaints that our police department receives from our community, the San Diego Police Department is taking up a stepped-up, proactive role in investigating these such illegal dispensaries.
Are there any legally operating dispensaries in the city now?
A dispensary is scheduled to appear before the Planning Commission later this month, so depending on the Commission's decision, that would be the first licensed dispensary under the new rules.
KPBS Metro reporter Taryn Minto. County supervisors are stepping up their efforts to fight Alzheimer's. Today, they approved a new strategy to take on the disease. It includes a multi-million-dollar fund drive for research and countywide standards to screen for the disease and to manage it. There's also a public awareness campaign, more training for workers, and more services and support for patients and their caregivers, including more to GPS devices to keep track of Alzheimer's patients. There are an estimated 60,000 countywide with the disease. It's the third leading cause of death in the region. The America's Cup will not come to San Diego in 2017. Organizers say they'll hold the race in Bermuda. One member of the San Diego bid committee says California's taxes and regulations were a major obstacle. Bermuda, by the way, offers financial incentives, including tax breaks. Lawmakers are also looking for ways to avoid a 5% a year tuition increase at the University of California. One plan would direct more money to the university system and charge higher rates for out-of-state students while increasing enrollment for the UC's and California State University system. Another plan from San Diego Assemblywoman Toni Atkins calls for zero-based budgeting, forcing the UC to justify its spending every year. She also wants to give the schools more money. A new survey shows most Californians think the state isn't spending enough on colleges and universities. The Public Policy Institute says 59% of the folks it polled think the state's not spending enough, but it's also found people didn't want to pay more taxes and they didn't want to increase student fees. Most college students are worried about tuition and their studies. It's hard to get them to think about health insurance, but getting them to buy it is essential to the success of the Affordable Care Act. So the State Health Insurance Exchange is reaching out to those students. As KPBS health reporter Kenny Goldberg tells us, it's a tough job.
At a recent Covered California forum at San Diego State, you could have heard a pin drop. That's because there were only 3 students in the audience. Nonetheless, presenter Jan Spenceley went through her entire PowerPoint routine.
So we're here to talk about today Covered California and making connections to health or making connections to health coverage. And hopefully those two things are synonymous.
Spenceley directs the nonprofit San Diegans for Healthcare Coverage. She tells the students that without health insurance, one accident could saddle them with tens of thousands of dollars of medical bills, and that would ruin their credit.
You don't get a phone on your own, you don't get a apartment on your own, you don't buy a car on your own if your credit's messed up.
After the presentation, graduate student Charlie Griggs says when you're in college, health insurance just isn't a top priority.
But I mean, school's a pretty big responsibility, so kind of trying to change the focus and move from doing homework or one thing to moving over and trying to take care of the health insurance, it's easy to put that on the back burner.
Spenceley says students are a tough sell. They think they're invincible.
And I don't think they realize that you're healthy until you're not. And that's not the time to get coverage. Or if you have any kind of an active lifestyle, including getting up and walking across the street, riding your bike, riding your skateboard, surfing, walking, going up and down stairs, something can happen.
Under Covered California, health insurers can charge higher premiums based on age. Still, on average, the premiums that older adults pay don't fully cover all of their medical expenses, whereas with young adults, the premiums they pay more than cover their expenses. That's why, for the system to work,
more young adults need to be enrolled.
Students in the Cal State system are not required to have health insurance. Even so, at San Diego State, students must pay a health fee of $175 per semester. That gives them access to a full array of primary care services at the Student Health Center, including radiology and prescription drugs, all at little or no cost. But SDSU social worker Irma Murphy says there's a catch.
We don't open after hours, so they're not going to be able to see someone if they're sick in the middle of the night. They'll have to go to an off-campus urgent care center or emergency, and we don't offer that. We don't have urgent care either.
In Covered California's first year of operation, more than 400,000 people ages 18 to 34 bought an insurance plan. Young adults represented 29% of all enrollees. That exceeded projections, and health exchange officials want to keep that kind of mix going.
Do you know if you need help signing up for health insurance in case you fall on that skateboard?
Near the SDSU Student Union building, Brittany Bloom hands out information about Covered California.
Do you all know if you need help signing up for health insurance? You two know if you need health insurance? Health insurance? Health insurance? Health insurance? Health insurance? Health insurance?
Thanks to a Covered California grant, campus coordinators like Bloom are on site at 12 of the largest Cal State schools. Bloom says it's hard for students to see the value of buying insurance.
Especially when you are young and think that you can rule the world and nothing will happen.
Bloom and her fellow coordinator, Kim Benzie, make presentations all over campus, but they usually don't draw much of a crowd. Still, if only one person shows up, they'll go through their spiel. They also pitch Covered California in classrooms, where they're guaranteed to have at least a few students in the audience. Bloom likes to mention the cost of monthly premiums.
So how much is it? Depending on your income, depending on the plan that you would like, it can be as low as $26, which is less expensive than many of our cell phone bills, hot date to the movies.
This presentation hits home. By the end, 7 students said they wanted information about signing up. Cal State officials estimate 10% of its students have no health insurance. Kenny Goldberg, KPBS News.
Our video journalist Nick McVicker helped produce that story. Open enrollment for Covered California runs through February 15th. Well, lots of folks worry about putting on weight over the holidays, but some San Diego researchers say timing of meals could be as important as what's on the plate. We're joined now by David Wagner to explain what scientists are discovering about obesity. David, why are researchers saying when we eat could be as important as what we eat?
Yeah, so this is coming from researchers at the Salk Institute in La Jolla, and they're basing this on experiments they've done with mice. They didn't necessarily feed these mice a super healthy diet, so they were feeding them a lot of fat, a lot of sugar, but they only let the mice eat within a 9 to 12-hour window. So for at least half the day, the mice were fasting. And at the end of these experiments, obese mice with diabetes, they saw their conditions improve. Now keep in mind, they were eating the same number of calories, just in a smaller window of time, and they still got healthier. Another interesting thing the researchers found had to do with the gut bacteria in these mice. So these are the tiny organisms that promote healthy metabolism. And in the mice put on restricted feeding schedules, there was a greater diversity of gut bacteria, and you saw more daily variation with the gut bacteria. The researchers think that might be playing a role in keeping them healthier.
All right, enough about mice. What does this mean for us?
Yeah, well, we're not sure yet. Researchers are planning to try this out in humans soon. But we can say that it does suggest we might want to think twice before reaching for that late night snack. There was one reassuring finding that I should bring up. The research suggests that having cheat days can be perfectly fine. So these mice, what they did was they let them feast all day long on the weekends with no time restrictions. And as long as they stayed on the schedule for the rest of the week, they still got healthier. So that might be good news as we're going through, the holiday season. What we see is these mice could go ahead and stuff themselves all day long, like I'm sure a lot of us did on Thanksgiving. And as long as they only did it once or twice a week, they still were healthy.
Well, that is a bit of relief. KPBS science reporter David Wagner. There's a new arrival at SeaWorld tonight, a killer whale born at around 12:30 this afternoon. The park says it's their 7th successful birth in 50 years. A killer whale pregnancy is 17 months long. The mother, Kalia, and baby both appear to be in good condition. They don't know yet whether it's a boy or girl. The baby weighs about 300 pounds or so and is 6 to 7 feet long.
I'm Judy Woodruff on the next News Hour. How public schools in Philadelphia are trying to stem the tide of students attending charter programs. That's Tuesday on the PBS News Hour.
Balboa Park's official kickoff to the holiday season is still a few nights away, but the lights are already on for December nights. This year's celebration also marks the opening ceremony celebrating the park's centennial. Peggy Pico takes us back to the park's birth.
Many believe the 100-year celebration marks the start of Balboa Park, but the park was actually founded long before the 1915 exposition. My guest, renowned California historian Kevin Starr, tells us how the park really got its start and how it grew into the place it is today. Kevin, welcome to Evening Edition.
Pleasure to be here, Peggy. Thank you.
Now, as I mentioned, some people call this celebration the Balboa Park Centennial, but the park came about long before 1915.
Came about 1868 when the sort of refounder of San Diego, Alonzo Horton, and the city council agreed to set aside 3,000 acres. Here's a town of 3,000 people setting aside a park of 3,000 acres because we know we're going to need it someday when we become a big city. And so the park dates from that time.
And that's why they were putting it on hold, because someday they had a vision.
They were holding an escrow.
Okay, let's fast forward to 1915 and the expo of the Panama, California exposition. Why was scoring this exposition significant to San Diego?
Well, New Spain and Mexico knew that a great port city would grow up in San Diego Bay. And the United States, which acquired, of course, California in 1846, knew that it would grow up. But with the completion of the Panama Canal and the opening of the canal, basically then the port of San Diego and the city of San Diego was now an Atlantic port and a major port with Atlantic connections in the Asia-Pacific basin. And a city of 50,000 wishing to be a larger, more developed city had to make something of that.
No, I know you've said that this park led San Diego's self-creation as you've said, Gibraltar of the Pacific. Is that because of this sort of as a port town, or what did you mean by that?
Well, I meant that Gibraltar Pacific, that San Diego, partly as a result of the great strikes and IWW conflicts of 1910 prior to the exposition, and because of the good feeling of the exposition, made a successful effort in the aftermath of the exposition to bring the Navy and the Marine Corps here, which it succeeded in doing with the help of Congressman Kettner, and it joined the Navy and became this great Gibraltar, this great military, industrial, and yet very deeply civilized complex.
So are there other ways that Balboa Park shaped San Diego besides the military?
I think the whole question of garden and garden design. There's something about the outdoor life that basically the public experience of flowers, parks, sports, tennis, golf, all the amenities of life that would be available for middle-class people is a signature contribution of Balboa Park and its development.
Now, I'm sure you've been following the ups and downs of planning the centennial celebration here. How do you think San Diego should celebrate this anniversary?
I think it should pay attention. I think it, first of all, shouldn't hype itself too much, shouldn't try and get too much out of it. But it should say to itself, what does this city have a DNA code? What's it about, this city? And how did that park, which wanted to usher that exposition in that park, to usher into being modern San Diego, what was it telling us that generation wanted us to be, and have we become that? So it's a wonderful chapter in the development of San Diego. It's not the most impressive, powerful, overwhelming story on the planet, but for the development of San Diego, it's a very important story.
It feels very cultural from someone who's grown up here. From your historical perspective, what do you see San Diego's future to be, let's say, short-term in the next 10 years and maybe in the next 100 years?
Well, I think that a lot of the ambitions behind the Panama, California exposition are coming true. That San Diego will be the way that New Spain and Mexico and the founders of San Diego in the 19th and early 20th century saw it to be, as the capital city of that place where Latin America, the Spanish Southwest, and Anglo-America come together and confront and interact with the Asia-Pacific basin. My friend, the late Neil Morgan, used to say it was like Lisbon. Lisbon was a smaller city, a more modest city, and yet strategically placed on the Atlantic. And look what Portugal did, spread Portuguese culture around the world. So I think the future for San Diego is great. But it must take its time, and always remember that there's something in the San Diego lifestyle that says it's got to also work for ordinary people. It also has to be a pleasurable place to live.
All right, California historian Kevin Starr, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
And I want to let folks know that the 2015 Centennial celebration officially kicks off with Balboa Park's annual December Nights Festival this Friday, December 5th, and runs through Saturday, December 6th.
As we mentioned earlier, we've got a flash flood watch in effect for much of the county through tomorrow morning. Coastal temperatures will be in the upper 60s, much the same for the inland valleys, and we might see the possibility of showers there through Friday. Mountain temperatures in the 50s for the next few days, 70s for the desert with some rain tomorrow. You can find tonight's stories on our website, kpbs.org/evening edition. Thanks for joining us. Have a great night.